Welcome to Noisy Tech. In this tutorial, we are going to look at how you can fetch an API using the HTTP client module in Angular. And then also look at how you can route between your components in Angular using the Angular routing. So to get started, I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop here. But before that, I'm going to open my terminal and then navigate to my desktop folder. Okay, so let me do this the simplest way. So if you can just create your folder like this. So let me name this, let's say routing. Okay, so when you create the folder on your desktop this way, you can then click here. You can then click here, then you type in CMD. So when you type CMD, then you hit on enter on your keyboard. It's going to open your current directory in your terminal for you. So you don't need to open your terminal and then navigate to your desktop before you just find this folder. So you can directly create the folder on your desktop and then you just type CMD here to open your current directory in your terminal for you. So if you are new to this channel or don't have any prior knowledge with Angular, you need to first install Node.js before you can get access to the Node package manager. That's what we're using to install the Angular dependencies you'll be needing for this project. Alright, so since I already have that installed, but if you don't have, you can just check my previous video on Angular to getting started with it and then how you can start your project, create components, and then all of that. Alright, so I'm just going to type ng new here. So ng-new is the command to create a new project in Angular, followed by the name of the project you want to create. So I'm going to create, let's say e-commerce. Let me just do shop. So shop is the name of the project. So if you hit enter on your keyboard here, it's going to start installing the project. But then if you already have an Angular project, you can add skip install. Okay, so this will just skip the installation process so that you just get the node modules from your previous Angular project so that I don't need to be installing the libraries anytime you want to create a new Angular project. But then if you are new to the channel, as I said earlier on, you can check my previous video on how to get started with Angular. With that, I explained how you can start a new Angular project. Since this course is going to be very short, I'm going to skip most of the things you'll be needing as a beginner. So when you add skip install, it's going to skip the installation process for you. Alright, so would you like to add Angular routing? Yes, we need that. So just type Y. So here you choose your preferred style sheet by using the arrow keys up and down to select the one you want. So I'm going to go with CSS here. So enter. Okay, so this will create your Angular project for you, but then there are no node modules in your project here. So if you check here, there are no node modules. So if you run your server, it wouldn't work. Engine serve. Okay. Let me cd into the project shop, then engine serve. Okay, you cannot find the packages you need to start your Angular project. So here you can even do npm install to install the packages. But then if you already have an Angular project, you don't need to reinstall the dependencies again. So you can just go back to your old project and then copy the node modules. But then if you don't have any Angular project, you can just do ng new, then you write shop without the skip install. So this will download all the libraries you need to run your Angular project. Okay, but then since I already have an Angular project, I can skip the installation of the packages. So I'm going to get that from my desktop in this folder, profile, my profile. Okay, so I'm going to get the node modules here. So let me just copy it from here and then paste it inside this new project. So you give it time to copy the files for you. Okay, so while it copies the file, you can navigate to our project in the VS Code. So you can choose to use any text editor you prefer, but then I'm using VS Code, so I can type code space and the dot to open this current directory in the VS Code for us. Okay, So when you create a new Angular project, you are going to have these files here. So we only navigate to our SRC folder. So inside the SRC folder, we have the app. So all the components you'll be creating will be inside this app folder. So the app is just the main component created by Angular automatically. And then it's being imported to the main HTML file you have in your Angular project here. Okay. So since we are going to be routing to different components, we need to create more components from our terminal. So I'll be adding Bootstrap as well to the project to speed up the development process. Okay, so to create a new component in Angular, we write ng generate component. Then you write the name of the component you want to create. Let's say you want to create a navigation bar. So let me write navbar for short. Okay, so this will create the component for you. So every component in Angular has these files. One HTML file, one testing file, your TypeScript file, and then the CSS file for that particular component alone. And then automatically it's going to add it to your app modules.ts for you. So you don't need to worry about the import in your Angular project. So once you create a new component, automatically it's going to add it to the component you have created. So here we have the name of the component we created, navbar component. So the Angular CLI is going to handle all this for you. So you don't need to worry about importing anything in your Angular project. Okay. So here I'm going to create another component, ng generate. So you can use G for short component, you can put C for short. So ng generate component, I'm going to name this about and then enter. Alright, so let me clear the screen and then generate some more. Ng generate component services. And then one last one, ng generate component. I'll create a contact page. So contact. Alright, so now have the component you'll be needing for this project. Okay, so the node models are also done copying. So you can see the errors we had here is now off. Okay, so let me just zoom in a bit. See, 28. I think that's visible enough. Okay, let me hide the sidebar. Alright, so here let me run the server to see if everything is working. So ng serve to run your Angular server. But if you add -o here, it's going to open your browser after it's done compiling. Okay, so you can choose to run it without the -o. That will also work. But then with the O, you just open your browser for you when it's done compiling everything for you. Okay, so once you have this landing page, it means your Angular project is ready. Okay, but then I'm going to be using Bootstrap. So I'm going to get the Bootstrap CDN from Bootstrap's official website. So you type getbootstrap.com. Okay, so when you're on this website, you just click on Docs to open their documentation. So Docs. Okay, so when you open the documentation, you just scroll down where you have CDN links. So I'll just copy this first CSS file. Then I'll add it to my main HTML file. So in your Angular project, there is a folder called app. So inside this app, you have all the components you have created in your project. We've created navbar, about, contact, and then services components. So they'll all be in your app. So now if you check outside, there's another HTML file here. This is called index.html file. This is where all the components you have created are going to be passed to. So all your components will be passed to the app root component. So the main component in your Angular project is called app. So to select any component in Angular, we use the selector name of that particular component. So if you check here, you can see the selector name for that particular component. So anywhere you want to use that component, you need to write the selector name there. Okay, so by default, Angular is going to import the main app component inside the index.html file for you. Okay, so I'm going to add the Bootstrap CDN links to this main HTML file. So since the first one is a style sheet, I'm going to use the link tag. So link, then you paste in the URL you copied. So secondly, we have the JavaScript file. Since it's a JS file, I'm going to use the script tag. Then just paste it here. Okay, so we're done with the Bootstrap. So let me take this file off. So now I'm going to get the navbar from Bootstrap. So if you scroll down through their documentation to the component section, we have navigation bars there. So navbar. So you can choose the navbar from here. Then you select your preferred style. So you can choose any of the ones here. But then I'm going to go with the first one. So just click copy from here. Okay, so when you copy that, you open your navbar component. So with the component you've created, there's an HTML file for it. So mostly all your components are named after the name of the component. So if you have navbar component, all your files created are going to have navbar at the beginning, just like you have contact, you're going to have contact or something in that order. So this is the default text that comes with every component created in Angular. P tag, then you have the name of the component works. So I'm going to take this one off, we don't need it. So I'll just paste in the navbar I copied from the Bootstrap. Alright. So here let me go back to the app.html file. So app.component.html file that has this content. So we need to take this content out, then load our own content on the web page. So I'm going to select all this and then delete it so that our main page will be empty. So rather be sending our component to this page. Okay. So before we create the route, let me just import the navbar here. So remember, to import any component in Angular, we use the selector name of that particular component. So if you check in the navbar TS file, it has the selector name. So if you want to use this component anywhere in your project, you need to write the name of that particular component. Okay, so if I add the navbar here, then go back to the browser, we have our navigation bar showing in our browser. Alright, so here I'm going to do some few modifications to the navbar before I proceed. So I'll just go to the navbar component here. I'll just change the name to say Donzi Tech. Let me even keep it in a span, but I can skip this process. So I'm going to use a span here. And I'll have the Donzi inside it, then have the tech outside. Okay. So I'm going to change it to container so that I'm going to get some spaces around the navigation bar, but I can choose to use the fluid. The fluid is just 100%. So I want these links to be on the far right. So I'm going to take this search box off. So the search is done with the form. So you can just select the form tag, and then delete it. So I want this navigation links to move to the side. So I'll just put MS instead of ME. So MS will take the links to the far right for me. So the links to, I'm going to update it to the component we created, so home, about, services, and then contact. Okay, so since I'll not be needing the drop down, I'm going to select it. So when you click the opening of the element, VS Code will automatically show you where that particular element is closing, so that I don't make mistakes while you are deleting them. Okay, so I'm going to take the disabled off as well. Okay, so we now have home. I'm going to change this to about, and I'll copy this and then paste it below. So I'm going to then change it to services. And then lastly, I'll do contact. So you can select it like this, hold Alt, Shift, and then arrow key down on Windows to duplicate it, or you can choose to copy and then repaste it again. So I'll change this to contact. So we now have home, about, services, contact on our navigation bar. Alright, so first let me just style this logo here to look a bit nice. Alright. So with every component you are going to create, it's going to come with its own CSS file, HTML file, testing file, and then your main TS file for your component. Right, so I'm going to go inside this CSS file here. So first I'm going to select the navigation bar. So it has a class of navbar. So the navbar, let me first take this class off so that we don't need to add important to overwrite the default classes in the Bootstrap. So I'm going to remove the bg body-tertiary. Right, then I'll add a new background to it. So the background, I'm going to make it white. Then I'll add a box shadow to it. 0 pixels, 6 pixels, and then 9 pixels. Then I'll choose a color. So let me choose black here. Okay, so now we have a black shadow, but then it's too deep. So you can just hover on the color, then reduce the opacity a bit. You only get access to this after you have installed color picker on your VS Code. So you can check that in your extensions tab here. On the extensions tab, you can just search for color. When you search for color, you can choose to install the highlight and then the color picker. So this will give you access to those properties in your VS Code. Okay. So now on the website, we have a navigation bar with a nice shadow beneath it. Okay, so after I'm going to style this navbar brand color, it has the logo. So navbar, I'm going to change the color to black. Even though it's already black, I'm going to change it to black again. And I'm going to increase the font weight a bit. So let's say 800. Okay, that's fine. So lastly, I'm going to change the color inside the span tag to red. Okay, let me even do it this way. Dot navbar brand. There's a span tag inside it. So I want to change the color of that to red. So let me add important to it so that it will overwrite the default color I've added to that particular element. Okay, so I'll have my links this way. So I prefer to keep my logo this way, but you can choose to use any styling you want. You are not limited to this. Alright, so from there I'm going to move straight to the home page. So the home page, I'm not going to do much on that. Oh, sorry, we didn't create a home page component. So let me quickly do that from the terminal. So I'm going to close the server. You hold Ctrl and C to break from the server. So let me clear the screen and generate one component for the home page. So ng generate component, I'm going to name this home page. Alright, so let me run the server again, ng serve. Alright, so we have the home page component here. So inside here, I'm going to have one ID here. I'll name it home page. I have the home page like this. So the home page, I'm not going to do much there. I'm just going to add a background and then some text here. So H2, let's use Bootstrap to take this to the center. I'm going to name this welcome to the home page. And then let me add some more content here to make it a bit longer. So a div, I'm going to give it a class of demo. I'm not going to write anything inside it. Another one, demo, the same class. So I'm having two divs with the same class, demo. Right. So I'll open the CSS file for the home page. Okay, so inside this file, I'm going to first select the ID home page. So I'm going to change the background to blue. Okay. Then I'll give it a height of 100 VH. Then I'll change the color of every text on this page to white. Okay, so I'm first going to select the demo class, then give it also a background of indigo, and then give it a height of 100 VH. Height of 100 VH. Alright, so let me change this class to, let's say, demo2, so that I'll have different backgrounds for them. So demo2, let I'm going to give it a background of say blue. Okay, let me choose blue violet and then give it a height of 100 VH as well. Alright, so here for me to display the nav and the home page on our HTML or our browser, we need to import it to the main app component. So you just go to the app.component.html file. That's the main HTML file that comes with the default Angular app or component. So app hyphen homepage. So that's the selector name for the homepage. Right. So I'll now have the homepage here nicely like that. Okay, so I want to also keep the navigation bar on top fixed so that when you scroll, we still have the nav bar there. Alright, so to do that, I will quickly go to the nav bar component here. So inside the nav bar component, you open the HTML file. Then on top here, we add a new class, fixed hyphen top. So this is a class to keep items on the top, which is fixed for you in your Bootstrap. Right, so now let me go back to the browser. So the nav bar will be fixed on top even when you scroll on the page. Alright, so I'm going to move on to the about component. So let me close this one off. Close, 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 and then close. So that our code will be cleaner to read. Alright, so now let me close the home page. I'm done with that. So the about page too, it also comes with its own HTML file. So I'm going to open this HTML file here. Then I'm going to have a background. Let me first give it an ID of about. So here I'm going to put another H2. Let me use Bootstrap to take it to the center. So text hyphen center. And I write welcome to the about page. Like so. Then same here, I'm going to have this demo. I'm not going to put any content in it. This is to just explain how you can route in your Angular project. Alright, so here I'm going to style that in the CSS file that came with the component. So the first one is about. I'm going to give it a background of blue. I'm going to choose blue violet. I'm going to swap the colors this time. So I'll make it have a height of 100 VH and change the color of every text in this page to white. So now the demo class, I'm going to give it a background of blue. Then I'll give it a height of 100 VH. Then the demo2 class, I'm going to give it a background of indigo and then a height of 100 VH. Alright, so let me check if I have the class there correct. Alright, so now let me import it also in the main HTML file to see if it's working. So app-about page. Okay. So now on the home page, so you can see we have the about page too here as well. Alright, so I'm now moving on to the services page. So the services page, I'm going to do similar thing here. So I'm taking the default p tag away, then I'm giving it an ID of services. So after this, I'm going to create a div and give it a class of demo. After that, I'll create another div with a class of demo2. Right, so I'll just go straight to the CSS file that came with the component. So hashtag services. I give it a background of blue again, a height of 100 VH, and the color of every text on the page to white. So I'll then select the demo, give it a background of indigo, a height of 100 VH. Then I'll select the demo2 class .demo2. I'll give it a background of blue, I'll choose violet blue, so blue violet, and I'll give it a height of 100 VH. Alright, since it's already working for the other pages, I'm not going to import it anymore. So I'll go straight to the contact page. I'm giving it an ID of contact. So now on this page too, I'm going to write H2 with a class of text center. So welcome to the contact page. Alright, so I'm going to create a div and give it a class of demo. I didn't write anything inside. So a demo2, I didn't write anything inside. Alright, so I can style that inside the CSS file that came with the component. So I start contact, I give it a background of indigo, all the colors to white, then a height of 100 VH. So same, I'm going to select the demo class, so demo, I'll give it a background of blue indigo, sorry, blue violet, and then the height of 100 VH. Then the last one, demo2 dot demo2, I'll give it a background of blue. Then I'll change the height to 100 VH. Alright, so let me see if I missed something in the services page. Yes, and H2 here. Okay, so welcome to the services page. Alright, so if you want to route between the components you have using your navigation bar here, in Angular you can use the router. Right, so by default, Angular will ask you when you are creating your project if you need routing in it. So when we started the project, I choose yes, so that we have this file here, so app-routing.module.ts. So we'll be using this file to create routes between our components in Angular. Alright, so before you create the route, you need to write something inside this array or list here. So we use curly brackets. So the first parameter you write, or the first thing you have to write, or you can choose the part of the component you want to create, right? So I'm going to call this route home. Then you assign it to a component. So you first have to import the component here before you can add it to it. But then I have a VS Code extension to do that. So when you add the name of the component here, it will automatically do the import for you, right? But then if you are not comfortable with importing your components or don't know how to import them, you can go to this file to get it. So inside your app.module.ts file, it will automatically do all the imports for you. So you can just copy all the components you are going to route from this page. So let me even do it this way. So copy it from here, and then you go back to the routing file. Then you just paste it on top here. Okay, so that I don't need to worry about importing it yourself in case you don't have that extension installed. Alright, so by default, I'm going to keep my home page blank, so I don't need to write / to get access to that component. So path again. So I'm going to have the about page. So the route name is going to be about. So you bring a comma, then you add it to the component. I want to add it to the about page. So about component. Okay. So you bring a comma, then you add the next route. So path, I want to add this to the services. So component name will be assigned to the services component. Then the last one is the contact. So path contact. Then I'll assign it to the contact component. So contact component. Right. So since we don't need to create a route for the navbar, I'm going to take this import away because we wouldn't need it here. Okay. So now after we have created the route, we now have to tell Angular where to pass the route. So we are going to add that inside our app.component.html file. So I'm going to delete all these ones from here. So this will be the outlet for all our routes. So we need to write router outlet. So router outlet like this inside the app.component.html. Alright. So now if you check our web page, we only have the home page showing here. So if you want to go to another page, just write the name of the route you created. So let's say about, then it will take you to the about page. If you need contacts, they will take you to the contact page. If you need services, it will take you to the services page. Alright, but then we need a navigation bar to be doing this, and then the page keeps reloading anytime you write the part here. Right, so the purpose of Angular is not for you to be reloading your page anytime you make a request. So the data is the only thing that needs to be updated on your page. You don't need to refresh anything with it. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to do some few changes in the navbar. I'm going to break down this folder here and then open the HTML file that has the navigation bar. Alright, so inside this file here, I can add, since it's the home page, I can put a / here or route to the home page. So inside this href2, I'm going to change it to about, that's the name of the path. So here too, I'll change it to services, and then the last one, I'll change it to contact, because that's the name of the route we created inside this file. So the name you have here should be the same thing you're going to use. All right. Okay. So first, let me also import the navbar to all the components. So the same way we add the components in other HTML files, I have to use the selector name. So for the home page, I'm going to add the navigation bar here. So on top of this thing, I'm going to import it. So app-navbar, like so. I'm going to import it for the contact page as well. So app-navbar, and then the about page. So app-navbar, that's the selector name for it. And then the last one I think is the services. So app-navbar. Okay. So you are going to have the navigation bar on top of all the pages. So if you click on home, it will take you to the home page. But then if you check the browser here, it reloads anytime I change the route. So if I click on services, the page reloads. We do need to reload the page in Angular when you are creating routes. Right. So the best thing you can do is to use router link instead of the href. So in Angular, we don't use the href here. You can put router link. So router link instead of router outlet. So you have to be mindful of the spellings here. So router, lowercase, and the L is capital. So if you miss one of that, it's not going to work. Okay, so now we have it here. You can navigate successfully to all the components or the pages without reloading anything. The page doesn't reload, but then we can navigate to different components you have in our project here. Right, so this is helpful if you are loading one-page application. So an example is like your Gmail. So anytime you click on your inbox, it doesn't reload your page, but rather it takes you to that particular component and then loads the new data you have in that. So that's the purpose of the Angular routing, so that you don't need to be refreshing your page anytime you make a request to a component. All right, so if you have any questions on this, you can leave it in the comment section below, then I'll check that for you. So the next thing we are going to look at is to fetching an API using the HTTP client module. All right, so to make API calls in your Angular project, we need to use what we call the service. Okay, but it's not necessary, but then if you use a service, you can fetch that service in any component you have in your project. All right, so here I'll write ng generate service, then write the name of the service you want to create. So let's say you want to create a service to fetch an API. You can choose any name you prefer, but then I'm going to use, let's say, get, or let me say get, or let me put profiles. Okay, I'm going to create a service and name it profiles. So the same way you can change this to S for short, you can change it to Gen for short. So ng generate service. So you can choose to type it in full, or you can use the initial, so service, like this. Then you hit on enter on your keyboard. It's going to create the service for you. So the service only has two files, one TS file for testing, the spec.ts file for testing, and then the main testing file. So mostly all your .spec.ts files are used for unit testing in Angular. All right, so here I'm going to get one endpoint and then fetch it in this project. All right, so I already have some endpoints built with the Django REST framework. I think the URL is this. All right, yes, yes. So this is the endpoint built in Angular, Django using the REST framework. So I'm going to fetch this endpoint inside the Angular project. So first I'm going to create another component and then name it profiles. So engine generate component profiles. Okay, so we now have a new component profiles in our project. Okay, so let me work on this HTML file before I touch the HTTP client module. So I'm going to remove the default p tag here. So this is the profile.component.html. So let me close these ones off so that the file looks more understandable. Okay. So the profiles component and then the HTML file that came with it. So here I'm going to create a div and then give it an ID of profiles. So I'm going to start this real quick so you can slow down the video to do that. So this is a class in Bootstrap container to create margins at the ends of your element for you. So before and after it. So container, then I'm going to add h2 here, and then I'll take it to the center using the text center class in Bootstrap. So I'll write this profiles. Okay. So now after this, I'm going to have a div to contain the profiles I'll be getting. So here, let me first do a div. I'm going to use a row. So this is the Bootstrap grid system. So inside this row, I'm going to create columns inside it. So column for large screens, I want 4, but then for medium screens, I want 2. So I'm putting 6 there. It has to sum up to 12. So margin 12, I'm putting 3. So I to be creating spaces at the top for me. All right. So first, I'm going to do profile. Let me just put box, a simple class here, box. So I have a div profiles. That's the main one. Inside it, I have another div container. Inside it, I have another div row. So inside the row, then I have a column. So inside the column, I have another div with the class of box. Okay, so I'm first going to show the image here. So let me write image box. And I'll use the img tag here. So inside the image box, I'll have that. And I'll put a p tag here. So inside the p tag, I'm going to have the details of the person. Alright, so let me use this Bootstrap class here, dflex. That's display flex in CSS. So h4, let me use h3 instead. So I'm going to show the full name of the person first. So full name, I'll be adding the name after I fetch it. So full name, let me check. So p tag, let me see what's going wrong with Angular. Why is it complaining? Okay, so let me use a div instead. So div h3, another h3 for, let me check the attributes I added in the endpoint. So I have full name, email address, gender, location. So full name, email address, I'll have gender. So I'll be leaving a link to the endpoint in the video description so you can add more attributes to it. But then for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to limit it to the full name, email address, gender, and then the location. Okay. So now let me start this with CSS. So I'm going to first select the box class here. So if you click here, it will show you where it is ending. So the box contains all these things. Alright, so even when you fetch it, I can still change the CSS for it. So I'm going to add a background of white, even though the page is already, on the page is not white, so I'm giving it a background of white. So I'm adding a border radius to it, so 7 pixels. Then I'll add a box shadow around it. So box shadow 0 pixels, 6 pixels, 9 pixels, and then I'll add the color. So I'm going to hover on this and then reduce the color opacity a bit. Okay. Let me first create a route for this one so that we can check how the shadow is looking on our web page. So to create a route, I'll just go back to the app routing.module.ts. So inside this file, I'm going to add the new component created. That's profiles. So component name will be assigned to the profiles component. So you can check your app.module.ts file to find how to import this one. So you can just follow the same process to import it. But if you have Angular extensions or Angular 16 extensions installed on your VS Code, it will just do the import for you the moment you write the name of the component here. Okay, so I'm going to add this to the navigation bar as well. So after the services page, let me copy the services. So services, let me paste it below here. Now change this to profiles. Then I'll change the name to profiles as well. Alright, so now let me check the browser. So engine serve, let me run the server again. Okay, so we have the profiles component here. Okay, that's fine. But we don't have the navigation bar on that page. So that's the purpose of component in Angular. So you don't need to be creating navigation bar all over again, unlike the normal way we do it with HTML. So any changes you want to make in your component, you just go to the navbar component, update it there, and it will automatically affect all the pages you had that component on. So you see there's no need to recreate a navigation bar. Okay, I'm going to add some paddings. Yeah, the border radius were added. So let me add some paddings to it. So 20 and then let's say 30 pixels to create some spaces between it. Alright, so the main div here, profiles, I'm going to give it an ID. And then margin top, let me use padding, so 70, 0. So 70 for the top and bottom, and then 0 for the left and right. Okay, so now all the H3s on this page, I'm going to reduce their font weight. So I'm going to reduce the font weight to 300. Okay, that's fine. And then let me reduce the font size as well. Let me do 17 pixels. Oh, that's too small. Okay, 20 is okay, I think. Okay, so we can now fetch the endpoint, but then if you fetch the endpoint, you can just resize the images to fit the container. Okay, but then since we don't have the sizes now, we can just fetch it and then check it later. Okay, so here for you to make any HTTP request, you need to use the HTTP client module. So you first go to your app.module.ts file, then you import the HTTP client module. Alright, so you write import curly bracket, so you can give a space, but you can ignore that. HTTP client module. Okay. From @angular /common/HTTP. So that's where we have the HTTP client module. So from @angular /common/HTTP. That's where we get the HTTP client module. So since it's a module, you are going to add it in your import here. So HTTP client module. Alright, so we're done with this file here. So let me go back to the service created. So the service you created is profiles.service.ts. So now inside this service, I'm going to import the HTTP client, not the module. So import, let me give a space between, but I can skip that, HTTP client. Okay, so HTTP client from @angular /common/HTTP. Okay, so now we are going to use the constructor function here. So I'll write private. Then let me just create simple variable. Then I'll assign it to the HTTP client module. So HTTP client. Okay. So now after you do this, you can just create a function for that. So I can say maybe get profiles. Or let me just say get users. Get users. So now inside this function, I'm going to return this dot. Since we have assigned it to the HTTP client, so HTTP client modules gives you access to all these methods. Okay, so since we are getting from the endpoint, I'm going to use get. Okay, then I'll just pass in the URL to that particular endpoint. So I'm just going to copy the endpoint here. There's the link for that. So I just copy it from here. And then I'll add it here. I can choose to create a variable on top, then you add it here, but then I prefer to add it directly inside the code here. Okay, so now this all we need to do for this service file. Anytime I want to make HTTP request, we use the HTTP client module to do that. Okay, so now let me go to the profiles component, profiles. So I'm going to open the TS file in the profiles component. So there's it. So profiles.component.ts. So this file. So let me hide the sidebar. So first, let me import the service created. So import, the service name was profiles service. Okay, so profile service, then you write the path to where it was created. All right. So here I'm going to call on the constructor function again. Let me give a space here. Right, so here I'm going to create another one. So private. So I'm going to name this, let's say, profiles. Or okay, I will do profiles. And then I'll assign it to the profile service. Okay. So now inside the constructor function, let me first create another variable here too. So let's say users, and I'll assign it to any. Alright, so this dot profiles dot, okay, so since we already have this method inside it, get users. So we have this method inside the service. That's why we got access to it after we brought the dot. So get users, that's the method inside the service file. So dot get users, since the method, you need to bring the bracket or the parentheses. And then we need subscribe. So you need to subscribe because when you fetch this data, you're going to get an observable. Every time you get an observable, you need to subscribe to it. Right, so dot subscribe. Right, so here this is just like writing the normal for each loop in JavaScript. So here I'm going to put a variable here, let's say data, then I'll write this arrow function. All right, so here I'm going to assign this data that I'll be getting from the endpoint to this user variable. So this dot, since a class, I'm using dot. That's why I'm using this. Unlike unlike Python where you use self to reference the current instance of the object. So here we are using this. Since we are using JavaScript to use this, now refer to the current instance of the object you are working with. All right, so this dot users is equal to data. Right, so let me log this in the browser. So log users, so let's check if the data is being logged. Okay, so this dot users. All right, so here on the profiles page, let me inspect cross header not allowed, cross origin. So I need to allow this in my project. Okay. Well, let me use a simple API so that we don't get any errors if you are trying it on your own. So let me get the GitHub API users. All right, so this is an API from GitHub. So let me fetch this one instead. Okay, so because I need to do some configurations before it can communicate with this. Okay, so I'm just going to update the endpoint in the service file. So I'm going to take this one out and then I'll paste it here like this. Okay. So now let me check the console. So now from the console, we can see we have the data here. Okay. So now since everything is working, we can then fetch it and then render it on our document or template file. So now inside the profiles.component.html file, I'm going to loop through this. I'm going to duplicate this div here. So I'm going to use the for loop in Angular. So ng for. And I'll write the normal JavaScript here. So this is a for loop. So let user of users. So users is the variable you have in your TS file here. Okay. But then this is a new one we are creating to represent each object inside the list or the array. Okay. So the first one is the person's image. So users dot. So anytime you fetch an endpoint, let me take this in, I will give you an error. Let me put something there. So there's an attribute called avatar underscore URL inside the endpoint. So let me quickly show you that one. So inspect here. And then let me zoom in. So if you check the endpoint, it has this attribute. So anytime you are given an endpoint, you need to check the attributes that were used to represent each feature of the object. So inside this endpoint, each object has this attribute, avatar URL, that's the URL to the person's image. So if you want to get a link to the person's profile, that's HTML URL. If you want to get the person's name, they use login. So any attribute you want to access, you need to first look at the keys they use for that. Okay. So we have avatar URL, that's given as the picture. So if you want the person's name, we use the login. If you want the person's profile link, we use the HTML URL. All right, so let me close this back off again. Okay, so engine 4, then we have, okay, avatar URL. So here to show the person's name. So since I'm changing the endpoint, I'll change the attribute I have here. So it's not full name, it's rather username. But you can try your hands on it. So I'll fix that cross origin. Then later you can add it to the project. So this one was login. Okay, so I wouldn't need this anymore. And then this as well. So now the last one is a link to the person's profile. So let me put an A tag here. So inside it, I'm going to add a button. Then I'll say view profile. So I'm going to add a link to the person's profile here. So it is user.html underscore URL. So you can cross check if you are not sure of the name of the endpoint. So I want it to open in a new tab anytime you click on the button. So let me use a bootstrap class for this button. So btn and btn primary. Okay. So we are going to have it this way, but then the divs are kind of scattered. Let me check here. All right, so let me add a width of 100% to all the images. So width 100%. So I will just fill the entire screen for me. All right, so width of 100%, I'm having it this way. But then the images are still not looking nice. Okay. So to fix that, there are two ways. So I'm going to first take this flex up so that I'll have the image on top. So I'm removing the display flex class. Display flex, I'm taking it off. So the person's image will be on top, then we have the details below. Okay, so we have it running now. So if you click on anyone's profile, it's going to view that profile for you in the GitHub. Okay. So view profile is going to open that for you. All right, so that's it with fetching the HPI in Angular. So in the same way, if you have any questions on this one too, you can leave that in the comment section below. All right, so there's one thing I skipped. So with the images, you can use string interpolation to show that, but then it is always better you use property binding for your images. So I'm going to put it as a property for this one. So for property binding, we have the square bracket, the name of the property, that's the src attribute. So src, then I'll do user.avatar underscore URL. It's the same thing. There's no change. It's the same thing. But then it's always better you use the property binding instead of the string interpolation when you are adding a property to your elements. All right, so I'm going to end the session here. So if you have any questions, you can leave that in the comment section below.